Jay, we're back again with another episode thanks to our Dig Me Out Union on Patreon. You can help us make the next episode happen by joining us at dmounion.com or digmeoutunion.com. And Jay, on this episode, we've got half the union here. It's pretty filled up. This is probably, maybe aside from our Nirvana episode, the most attended roundtable.
Well, 1992 was kind of important, I guess.
Yeah, we won't miss a single album that was released during the entire year. It's all going to be covered here.
Be well covered.
Yes, I expect that this group of ne'er-do-wells will cover it all. I'm just gonna look at my screen and see everybody who's here. We've got returning veterans, and we've got well, one new person. Let's start with our rookie, Hale.
It'll be me.
Where are you joining us from, Hale?
I'm joining from Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, New York, the epicenter of everything cool from 2000 to 2003.
Especially of me. Yeah.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. I'm disappointed to hear that I'm no longer the epicenter of cool. I thought my presence was worth more than that. But
no, fortunately, that has taken up residency in Austin, Texas for the last since Jay moved down there. That is the epicenter of cool. I don't know if you know, but Jay, wherever Jay goes, that's the cool center.
Oh, then I'll see you there.
I just learned that that's the second most expensive housing market in the country after San Francisco.
Wow.
So
really,
congratulations.
That's crazy.
Thank you.
Yes, you and also Jay raises the cost of living wherever he goes.
Yes,
with his outlandish spending on real estate.
Just
really,
down here,
we're talking mortgages already. I mean, That means we're approaching 50, right?
Yes, we are. Anybody got a good guy for their refis? Anyway. Everybody else has been here. Welcome back, Jeff Jantis. You were just here not long ago, I believe.
True. How's it going, guys?
Great. Below you in my square section, he's going by the name Willow Red Dog, which sounds like one of Will Smith's kids. I'm not sure what's going on there. Welcome back, Joe Royland.
Hello, good to be here tonight. That's actually a reference to a former dog. So.
Oh, gotcha. I thought maybe there was a 92 reference in there somehow that we didn't.
No.
We're gonna learn about something obscure.
Just how it signed me in via Google. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Square below that, Ian McIver. Welcome back, sir. I like seeing that record collection. Has it grown since the last time we've spoken to you?
Only by one. My sister got me the Dave Gahan and Soul Savers LP for Christmas.
Nice. I
need to add to the mode collection.
Yes, there you go. Crossing over, passing Jay in the middle, Citizen Eric, otherwise known as Eric Peterson. Welcome back to the show, Eric.
Good evening.
Like that reference. If you'll notice, I have performing behind me, for those who are watching the video, Alice in Chains from the movie Singles, playing live.
I just finished watching Singles, so
good prep for this.
Nice.
That's a pretty serious drum riser for a club show. I'm just saying.
It was like in a warehouse.
Oh, okay.
If I remember that scene correctly.
Yes.
It wasn't even like in a proper venue.
Just put up on mezzanine on the stairs.
I want to say that's just plywood that they're playing on. It's not like a really fancy riser going on there. Up above Citizen Eric, we've got Phil Fleming. Welcome back to the show, Phil.
Hello.
Going cross square from me, Carl Foss. Welcome back to the show as well.
Thank you.
And last but not least, a man that you've recently gotten to know once again. He's been here forever, but Chip Midnight joining us now for interviews. The most recently just went up the interview with Terry from XYZ. I can't say his last name. I'm going to screw it up, and I don't like to screw up last names. It's very important to me not to mess up people's names. Ilus. When I listened to that, because I edited it, I was very distracted by his accent. Let me just say, I was doing a French accent for the rest of the day. It was,
Can we get that tonight?
yeah. I will be doing the whole episode like
All right,
Terry
I'm out.
Loose, talking about what goes on and the rock and roll shows.
That is almost as bad as my British accent.
Yes, it is. Close. I think my wife heard me through the walls and just dropped a glass and it broke from hearing my terrible accent. We are here to discuss 30 years ago. Everybody let the groan out now. 1992. We do this every year. The first roundtable of the season is going back and revisiting albums for the anniversary. You know, last year was 91 and in 2021. Before that it was 1990. We've covered up to, I think we've already done, I think 95 through 99. Is that correct, Jay? Can you check my math on that? I think we only have a couple more years left to do, and then we maybe have to recycle these shows. Maybe do
That's
them again.
right. Yeah, I hadn't
Going
thought
to
about that.
syndication.
Yes.
dig me out reruns.
Yes, reruns. Well, the focus of these shows, we know the big albums that came out these years, and some of them stood the test of time. Maybe some of them haven't, and we'll talk about those. But we're really interested in digging out stuff that maybe flew a little under the radar, maybe was underappreciated, overlooked, stuff that maybe didn't get found until years later. Maybe there are things that you were on the train right when it left the station back in 92. I realized personally that a lot of the stuff that I really liked from 1992, I didn't discover it until 93 or 94. And some as late as the late 90s.
I noticed too. I looked at some playlists for the rock hits of 92, and a lot of those albums are from 91.
Right.
So yeah,
Isn't that always kind of the way it is, though? That
Hmm.
there's that carryover. There's no
Sure.
like, not so, 1992. We got to throw it out of that old stuff.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about the fall of 91, there were so many big albums released. It's not surprising that they were going multiple singles. I mean,
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses was releasing singles into the middle of the decade off of Use Your Illusion. So
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
surprised. And obviously Nirvana really, Smells Like Teen Spirit hit in fall of 91, but you got 4 more singles coming after that, all in 92, 93. So let's get into what we like to talk about here, which is the albums that came out. So I'm going to go around this virtual room. I'm going to ask each of you, give me one album, and we'll get to more picks later, but give me one of your albums that you think, wow, this was really overlooked at the time, but has become really important either to you personally or you think has become, more of an influential album than maybe people realized at the time. I'm going to start in reverse order of who I just went to. So I'm going to start with Chip Midnight. Chip, what's a record from 92 that fits that criteria for you?
For me, it's Erotica by the Darling Buds.
Ah.
So they were a UK band, female singer. People might know them from the So I Married an Ex Murder soundtrack. They had a single called Long Day in the Universe. I think Madonna's Erotica came out the same year. And so there was that kind of, confusion between the two. And they were a UK band. And I honestly don't know if they ever toured the US. They may have, but I don't remember that. But yeah, so that's my pick.
Cool. That's a good pick to start out with. Carl, what's your pick? You just disappeared.
There we go. Now I'm here.
Now he's
Yeah.
back.
All right. So when I was running through these, probably my favorite 1992 album that I still revisit all the time is Cracker's Self-Titled, which is famous for teenage angst, but I really love that album, and the closing track, Dr. Beatrice, is just fantastic. And it pairs so well with Kerosene Hat. And I don't know if people really remember Cracker as an album band other than the hit singles, but I just always come back to that album.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I know Kerosene Hat better than that
That
record.
one had the big big hit.
Low and
Yeah.
Low was on Kerosene Hat, but Teenage
Yeah.
Angst,
Low and Euro.
What I Need Now was a huge radio play up here on
Teen
college
Angst,
radio.
Yeah.
But the whole album's well written and the guitar's playing good. And I mean, Cracker's still doing shows and making albums, and it's a band I really like, and that's an album I just keep coming back to from '92.
Phil, what's an album that you keep coming back to from 1992 that maybe people didn't know at the time?
Well, all right. So 92 for me, at least for me, it was very interesting because it was definitely a mesh of what was big and mainstream prior to 92 and what became big and mainstream after 92. And two albums immediately came to mind that were kind of a bridge. But I'll mention one of them because it is vastly underrated, and that is Warrant's Dog Eat Dog. I have this strange theory in regards to hair metal acts. Their third albums tend to be the ones where they decide to actually put some thought into what they're creating, and it's not all, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So they're talking about other things, and that's what really got to me. And the reason why it's kind of a bridge is because when alternative was breaking, the subject matter was all just anti-sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And having a hair metal band like Warrant almost embracing that, I found really, really interesting.
And I that's a good example of a record where I don't think they sound grungy. They just sound creative for the first time.
They embrace more grunge sounds later in the decade, but
sounds like April 2031, and Andy Warhol's right, and it's just like, this is Warrant, okay. I mean, it's just
exactly.
Like
and then and you mix that with songs like The Single Machine Gun and an excellent song, The Hole in My Wall, which is basically about voyeurism. But yeah,
is that the album that famously Janie Lane said he went to the label President, and they used to have his album cover on the wall behind the secretary, and when he went back, they had the Alice in Chains Dirt artwork.
Yep,
that is correct.
And that was, I mean, no matter what else you want to say about Warrant, that is a great anecdote. I mean, that's a top 10 anecdote of that era.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the saddest part is, out of the 3 albums to date, at that point, they had just given the label their best record, and like after the first single, they're just like, yeah, let's just push Alice in Chains some more.
Eric, you were just chiming in. So what do you got? Yeah, get out of the way.
I was going to bring that up too.
4 Non-Blondes, Bigger, Better, Faster, More. I think this is the epitome of an album that people heard the single. A lot of people hated the single. Nobody listened to the album.
It's a good album, and Linda Perry just did wonders on that.
We could talk a lot about this later in the year, but I think that there was definitely a lot of misogyny towards this band that is a big part of why they have largely been written out of the history books about alternative and grunge, especially, with this record coming out in 92 and having a massive hit that was, maybe we can call it cheesy, but it's no cheesier than any number of then current singles talking about the state of the world. So I want to challenge everyone in the next year, listen to that album just once. Just put the full album on once.
Maybe
Don't worry
it'll
about the single. Just play the album.
maybe it'll come up in a poll. Maybe somebody will pick it for their monthly pick. Who knows? Or for
We
the
shall
yearly
see.
pick. We'll see.
There's
We
some
shall
good songs
see.
in there. There are a couple of songs that are exactly what you fear they would be, and then there are a couple of songs that are the really good band that people never got to hear.
Well, additionally, Linda Perry's voice. I mean, she had this great like blues rock voice that maybe got lost in the pop shuffle, but I can't think of anybody else that had a voice like that at this time. Maybe Danzig did with
Napolitano, but that's all I can
but you know, that great blues bass voice.
Gotcha.
That people used to mistake for Ann Wilson of Heart and Geddy Lee of Rush. I went my music store days. I would have people coming in thinking it was both of those artists and not realizing it was a new band with a different female singer.
Yeah, you got that new Rush album?
Also a band that was one album and done.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask, but that's right. Ian, what is your pick?
Well, I've got a whole list here, but I gotta go with this one. This is one of my all-time favorite albums, released in 1992. Frontline Assembly, Tactical Neural Implant. So it is a very well-regarded industrial album, and that tends to make a lot of best of lists for the genre, and even the single mind phaser for songs. I think one I saw, like the top 101 songs, it was number 6. So it's an album that's always in rotation for me. I mean, it's back in the day when albums were only like 8 songs and 40 minutes, but it's quality, not quantity.
Excellent. Joe Royland, what is your pick?
God, there's so many choices, so it's hard to narrow it down to one. But if I had to pick one, I'm gonna go with Dada's Puzzle. That was an album from the minute I heard it, like the cassette just lived in my car. The CD finds its way into my CD player at least once every year since it came out. It had one minor hit with Disneyland, but the whole album is absolutely killer. And they're a great band to see live still, you know.
A band we have talked about on this podcast.
Yep.
And also a lot of 92 albums. That you can check out by going to digmeoutpodcast.com and just put in 1992. You'll find them all. Jeff, what's your pick for an album you think that folks might have missed back in 92?
Well, if they missed it in 92, I hope they went back to it like I did and found it. And that's the Jayhawks Hollywood Town Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just, if you were, 14 like me and relied on MTV and college radio to get you your songs, it wasn't coming up. And even though they were on a separate parallel track from what alternative rock was doing, but they also popped in 1992, and it just took a while, at least speaking for me, and it's the hard thing to know, like what did people miss, and I don't know, because they weren't on MTV or in Rolling Stone much back then, but I think that's a great album.
I agree with you. That was a band that I didn't get into them until the next record, and which is Tomorrow the Green Grass, because of the single Blue, which got like enough college radio play that I was like, oh, what is this? And then went backwards and discovered that album and their first record. Hell, we have circled back to the beginning of our introductions.
Yeah, I wanted to second that Cracker album. That's one where I know and love every song. But I was looking at
I was going to say it also has the best hidden song on any album ever with Eurotrash Girl is track 69.
That one's Kerosene Hat.
Oh, is it?
Hat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But, I mean, they're both great albums. But
that is right. That is on Kerosene Hat.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's all good. Cracker forgives you. But I was looking at what albums came out in 92, and 92 is it's the year I walked in as a 12-year-old and walked out as a 13-year-old. So there's sort of two 92s for me. There's the good 1992 that I've come back to later as, a mature music fan, and there's, the nostalgic 1992 of music I liked as a 13-year-old. I cannot necessarily endorse, but love anyway. And I'm going to go with that. And I'm going to give a shout out to America's Least Wanted by Ugly Kid Joe, who most people know for their single
Everything about you.
Yeah, which as a 12 or 13-year-old was exactly what I wanted. Guns N' Roses and Nirvana were the same thing to me. I just wanted like snotty, sarcastic, but still kind of G-rated, hatred or whatever. And then the other single from this was Cats in the Cradle, their cover, which isn't really good at all. But a lot of the stuff on here was just exactly what a 13-year-old burgeoning metal fan.
Oh yeah, with Neighbor.
Neighbor,
and
yeah. Neighbor was the
Goddamn
single,
Devil.
yeah, Neighbor was really I think they were trying to lean into the Everything About You image and kind of just double down on like, we're so obnoxious, look at us. And it worked at that age.
The Bloodhound
pretty
Gang
much.
before the Bloodhound Gang.
Yeah.
Before the
And-
Bloodhound, yeah. If I were 5 years younger, I would have been real into the Bloodhound Gang when the time came.
I
This
just
was
I
my-
just wanted to know the label guy that signed off on that album title, because you should never release an album title that is the review of the record.
So I don't know the name of the label guy, but this album does end with the only song on here that isn't sung by the lead singer, and it's called Mr. Record Man, and it's just a out of character song that's basically, hey, label guy, thanks so much for signing us. We're so grateful. So they thought they owed a little favor.
Well, I mean, it was the perfect follow-up to a band who released a very snotty novelty song which is basically the last minute that hair metal meant anything to the populace. And of course they're going to release Neighbor because it's just as snotty. But yeah, there was like the non-single tracks on there had some good things going on in there. And then they went way serious on the third album, Menace to Sobriety.
Oh God, the third album I haven't heard. This album, I want to say, I think the song on here that I actually really do like is So Damn Cool. I would recommend that one even as an adult. Also, they doubled down on Everything About You so hard that they re-included Everything About You on this album, except
In
for
a
some
slight
reason,
remix,
the
yeah.
voiceover at the beginning of Julius Sweeney as Pat. It's like the Julius Sweeney mix of Everything About You.
I'm a little
Okay.
bit shocked that nobody covered that song during the pop punk era of like the 2010s.
I
Right.
know, that would have been perfect.
Oh yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
a pop punk fan listening to this, it's right there.
It's waiting for you. Jay, co-host of mine, do you have a
Yeah.
pick?
What's the criteria again?
Just something that
I have
wasn't-
so many records. I want to make sure I pick the right
Let's
one.
just pick one record that wasn't big at the time that maybe
Yeah.
has become more important to you or to just people in general. Something that has, not didn't get the love at the time, but you think it deserves it.
Oh, there's so many. I guess I'll go with Life, Sex, and Death, Silent Majority. So we reviewed the record. If you want to hear my thoughts on it, you can go search for it. But what I'm thinking about it now is every time it comes on, I'm just always blown away, and I want to go back and listen to it.
Dude, what's it wrong? It starts with an F.
There's a lot of foul language on it. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you like swearing, that's the record for you. Now
But well, they were when I think about it, it sometimes I hear it and I think they were way ahead of their time, and the other times I listen to it and I think this could have only happened in 1992. It's just this very like unusual combination of like a band that I think had a glam power pop rock background and then just took this strange turn where the lead singer spent a year or two living as a homeless person and just took on this whole new persona and these warped lyrics and incredible musicianship, incredible hooks, and just a very unique singer and overall package. So it's a lot of fun.
So I saw them live once, opened for Lynch Mob,
Yeah.
and he totally he lived that character, man. He smelled so bad. And then actually, I was at a Mighty Mighty Boss Tone show that year at the CMJ Music Festival in New York City, and he was in the venue walking around. And I mean, if people aren't familiar, he's takes on this character of this homeless guy, but he's all method acting 100% in. And so if you didn't know about the band or didn't know who he was, when they opened for Lynch Mob, I saw security try to kind of push him towards the door. And when I was in New York, he was not hanging out with the people. He was up in the balcony in the top corner by himself. It was the weirdest dude ever.
Yeah. It was so awesome to see them live. It's just one of those things where the way the whole thing plays out, the theater of all of it, and then you just go through that experience and this band comes out and just blows your face off. You can never relive it. It's like that happened one time. I can't ever go back and redo that again. And like, I'll just never forget it. So,
but I got to say that particular album, you wouldn't think so, but it is aged incredibly well.
Yeah. It sounds great too.
Mm-hmm.
Just got reissued on vinyl.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Music on Vinyl just put it out, or it's coming out within the next week or two.
Yeah. And if you go to on Instagram, Alex,
yeah,
I'm going to say it, Alex fucking Kane on Instagram. He's signing. He's selling signed copies. He's signing them. He's a guitar player from the band.
I follow him on Twitter, not Instagram.
Yeah,
cool.
Meanwhile, Jay goes shopping.
Get over there. Get over there, Jay.
I'm gonna go on mute so you don't hear me typing.
Well, I'm gonna pick one record that I didn't discover this band until probably 2 or 3 years later. And it wasn't because of the band, it was because of the band breaking up and forming 2 new bands. And that's Uncle Tupelo. The 1992 album, which is titled March 16th to 20th to 1992, because that's when it was recorded. I got into Wilco and Sunvolt. I heard Box Full of Letters on our college radio station. And then I got into Sunvolt when that album came out later, and I learned that they were in bands. It wasn't because of the internet; it was because somebody, told me. And I went back and I got all the records. I have the original CDs that were released by Rockville Records back. I had a special order through our radio or record store in Bowling Green. But I don't think that this record, even in the Uncle Tupelo catalog, gets as much love as I mean, No Depression spawned an entire movement of music and a magazine and was named after it. And this record is wildly different. They stopped playing loud guitars, which they had kind of been known as, Dinosaur Jr. meets Johnny Cash. And it's almost entirely acoustic record. They do traditional covers of like the Louvin Brothers and a whole bunch of other
Louvin Brothers reference on the Dig Me Out podcast.
There you go. Yes. You're only going to get it here, folks. It was I heard it in probably 95 or so, and I had never heard anything like it. I mean, I'd never listened to traditional country. I'd never listened to traditional folk or anything like that. It was completely new to me. And it's still to this day is like an important record because I had obviously, living through 92, 93, I heard all these loud bands, but hearing a band willingly just completely dismantle their sound and make something so interesting. And it really, I mean, a lot of the songs, even though they're speaking about coal mining and atomic power, had cultural and political relevance in the 90s in terms of their themes. So it was an interesting record to sort of wrap my mind around when I was only 20 something and still find it really interesting. One that I go back to more so than the final record, Anodyne, or even sometimes the first record, because I still feel Gone is my favorite of all their records. So it's probably my second favorite. So I want to get to some of the comments, and we can comment on the comments, not the ones that are happening in the chat right now, but the but the comments over on Patreon. Some folks couldn't be here with us, and that's okay. Not everybody's able to make it, but Mike Bond said he had a couple picks. He mentioned the Darling Buds, which you did as well, Chip. He mentioned Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine, which we've covered. Not that album, but we've covered. Catherine Wheel's Ferment, which is a very good record, their debut. Cracker Bash. I'm not familiar with Cracker Bash. I'm familiar with Cracker, but not Cracker Bash. And they're self-titled.
Cracker Brand, because that Cracker album is self-titled, but people call it Cracker Brand sometimes.
It says Cracker Brand is part of the artwork.
Yeah. So people like treat that as the title sometimes.
There's a band called Cracker
That's the
Bash.
first time I've heard that.
Nope, Cracker Bash was an actual band.
Yeah.
Oh.
Never mind.
He mentioned Curb's Doppelganger, which we reviewed on the show a couple years back. Daisy
Great album.
Chainsaws 11.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
Eugenius's Oogalama. I don't know that one. Anybody know that one?
Yeah, that was Eugenius.
It's-
Was that Eugene Kelly from Come Back to Me?
All right.
I want to say the Vaselines, maybe.
Oh, okay. PJ Harvey's Dry. Pop Will Eat Itself, The Look or the Lifestyle. There, I see Ian throwing the horns on that one. He likes that one.
Yeah, I like that.
Skatening, Stupid People Shouldn't Breed. Well, I agree with the sentiment. I am not familiar with the record. Therapy's Nurse. The Sugar Cubes Stick Around for Joy. Rides Going Blank Again. Morphine's Good. One that I will support here, the Tragically Hip's Fully Completely, which was the second hip album I got into. Ween's Pure Guava. So there are some good choices. And he said I could have easily compiled a top 50 albums. And I think, I toss it around to everybody, but I think that this is one of the hardest years of the 90s. Like, so much stuff came out that bands were so creative at this point. There was no like limitations. Radio was unsure of what to do with this. MTV was playing everything at some point during the day, and it just seemed like you can pretty much find 10, 20, 30 albums that you're like, these are great records.
I think this was the point where labels were like, oh, our plans for 1992 have fallen apart. What have we got on the
Completely.
roster? Or
Right.
what have we got on our farm team labels that we can just throw out there? Hey, that's a cool sounding pop song. Let's see if that sticks. I really do think that's what was going on. Additionally, with Nirvana breaking, all the rest, that suddenly people are like, oh, these are the bands that are getting played on college radio. So a lot of people were starting to tune into their local college stations, and college stations in a lot of places are responding by playing into that. And suddenly all the radio college DJs who were like, oh, we're gonna do this for fun, then I'm gonna go to law school, were suddenly like, oh, this could be a career.
So Eric, did you happen to, or did anybody happen to take a look at like the actual when stuff was released? Because
I did.
I mean, I looked it up. I was looking up different albums, trying to make my list, and I think you're right. I mean, Nirvana's album came out in '91 in September. Kind of when and I don't know if it was planned that way, but when kids are coming back to school, right?
Mhm.
If you look at what came out in September of '92, I mean, I don't know how I afforded to go to school in September. I mean, this is on my list, right? I have Blind Melon, Alice in Chains, Sugar, Nine Inch Nails, Stone Temple Pilots, Ugly Kid Joe, Screaming Trees, Stereo MCs. I'm missing one. The band Wax. I mean, it was album after album in September, and that if it was a marketing plan, it was a really good marketing plan because it was when kids were coming back to school.
I think somebody has a really interesting book to write about that period at the major labels when somebody walks in Christmas of 1991 and is like, guys, all of the stuff that we had planned for 92, we don't know if it's going to work. So I need ideas. I need bands. I need budgets. I need radio promo. The game has changed.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch of people going, oh, we don't know what to do. And then some smart ass kid in the corner going, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And that's when you start seeing also labels be like, so we need to invest in the Sub Pop label. We need to get these Athens bands. We need to get these Minneapolis bands.
Yeah. Well, that kind of thing happened in the mid '80s with the Athens and Minneapolis bands, but yeah, that whole era of 92 to probably early 94, the record labels, they, especially the majors, had no idea what to do, so they just signed everybody.
I mean,
So
Geffen
bar band
alone.
from just west of Akron, Ohio, gets $500,000 to make a record.
Yeah, I like Geffen Records alone. I want to see what those board meetings and what those A&R meetings were like.
Yeah. Another list we got from Gabriel Gutierrez. He listed some interesting ones that we haven't talked about yet. Liar by the Jesus Lizard. Fontanelle by Babes in Toyland. Cunning Stunts by the Cows. Pop Tatari by Boredoms. Icing by Cherubs. Stimulation Festival by Paintings. Lysol by the Melvins. And Harsh 70s Reality by the Dead Seas. He said this was also a good year for death metal. The standouts include The End Complete by Obituary, Last One on Earth by Asphyx, Legion by Deicide, Retribution by Malevolent Creation, Onward to Golgotha by Incantation. These are some hard words for me to say on the fly. And is that the ninth? I don't know Roman numerals that well.
Ninth.
The Ninth Crusade by
Fourth.
Bolt Thrower.
No, fourth.
Fourth.
IV or IX?
IV.
It's IV.
Fourth.
Ah, jeez.
Can we talk about metal for just a moment? Because
crazy
this was
year.
An interesting year for metal.
Yes.
The narrative that we've all seen out there over and over is Nirvana killed Guns N' Roses. Not true.
No.
Metallica, Anthrax, Slayer all start to chip away at that metalhead market, but so does White Zombie.
Oh, I have comments on this.
Yes, bring them.
Go for it.
Okay, because this is the Dig Me Out podcast, and we have the better EP rating. Les Exorcisto, Devil Music Volume 1 is my definition of a better EP. The first 5 or 6 tracks are amazing, and then it's just sludge from there on out. But I can't bring myself to never give it up. And I listened to it all the way through, even though it's a better EP. And I was 11 or 12 when it came out, and it's a perfectly packaged album for an 11, 12, or 13-year-old. It's like, that album is marketing genius. It's the videos, the artwork.
Oh, no.
So,
You're talking about an album that was single-handedly saved by Beavis and Butthead.
Yes, so
That's true. Yeah, I mean, MTV did a lot for that album.
After Beavis and Butthead
Yes.
said, "Yeah, this is cool, man."
We just heard a list that not only had a bunch of metal, but had a bunch of noise rock. This is accessible New York noise rock.
Yeah.
To the point that Rob Zombie was on Headbangers Ball painting the set for several episodes to promote this. And it didn't take off until Beavis and Butthead played Thunder Kiss 65. And I completely agree. This album is a worthy EP. It's too long. There's a, half the songs on this are stone classics of the genre and of the image. And that's why to this day, I think Rob Zombie's best bet would be to do like 6-song solid EPs.
Oh yeah.
Well, he kind of learned in future records to keep the length down. I don't think he's really released a record longer than 40 minutes since. His last few records, especially in the last decade, have barely pushed 35.
Sure.
But yeah, that one has lots of lengthy songs at the back end of it, and Yeah, I mean the singles that ultimately came out from it are stellar, and I believe they're all in the front half of the record.
So I got two more things to say about metal, and that's these two records, which are kind of the pillars of where progressive metal would go in the 90s. You got King's X by King's X, and you've got Images and Words by Dream Theater.
And I'd also add Far Beyond Driven by Pantera was released in 92.
Wow.
Yeah, Vulgar Display.
Nice.
It was Vulgar Display of Power came out. And
I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
I would argue, and
Vulgar Display. I'm sorry.
And it's just me, maybe, but I would argue this is the best metal album ever. Like this album, like I listen to this front to back.
Ooh,
all the time.
Throwing down the gauntlet.
That's some heat.
Fuck, I'll double devil horns.
By the way, do you know who's friends with Pantera and hangs out with them? King's X.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
The best live show I ever saw was Pantera. I mean, it was incredible.
So if I can set, can I just set, a little bit of context for 1992 in my memory? I turned 21 in 92. So, I'm older than some of the 12 and 13-year-olds from that time period.
And I'm older still.
I was, writing for the college paper, but in my memory, I still have a box of cassettes. So I think it was also like the cassette to CD era. Like I could still get a cassette for $7.99 as a college student.
It was $13.99. Yeah.
Yeah. So I still have a lot of cassettes from as I was going through. I'm like, I remember having Pantera on cassette and Nirvana and Dog Eat Dog and all that stuff on cassette that I eventually replaced with used copies of the CDs for $5. But it was such a weird. I think in the 91 episode, seeing Nirvana live in 91 changed my life for real. But as I looked at 92, I mean, I still have. I was pulling out. I was still buying Slick Toxic. If anybody remembers them. Bad for Good with the kid that was on Different Strokes.
Yep.
Tora.
Yeah.
I mean, so I guess I had not completely given up. I hadn't really made that 100% switch to alternative music from hair metal because I was still buying it.
Your stance on it was pretty much mirroring mine.
Yeah.
Because I came of age just moving from top 40 radio to mainstream rock radio right around 1990 when, hair metal was in its all golden diamond glory. And I liked it even though I didn't really identify with the content. I think that's why I took to alternative so well, because it didn't have that, kind of superficial, what's the word I'm looking for? Shallow content.
For me, 1992, that was the year I was 19 and turned 20. I was a freshman in college and then a sophomore in college at Lake Superior State University, which is way up in the middle of nowhere. And definitely there was the peer group that we were starting to listen to these new bands, Nirvana, Soundgarden. But additionally, we were still also listening to Motley Crue. We were still listening to Warrant. We were still listening to Rat, still listening to Queensryche. So it wasn't like, that everyone turned in all their hair metal albums. It wasn't like, you showed up at school one day and there was a big bin that was like, put the Motley Crue in there. So
Bon Jovi had a big album that year with Keep the Faith with a huge power ballad with Bed of Roses. I mean, that wasn't even my scene, and I picked up that CD.
Now you see that one is a great transitional period too, because if you listen to that full record, especially on the back half, you have a lot of songs that aren't, Bed of Roses, and I mean, just the first track, I Believe, on that one just shows a very, very different Bon Jovi.
Well, Bon Jovi's also coming off of the Young Guns 2 soundtrack, which was a massive hit and definitely leaned more roots rock, country.
Is that Blaze of Glory?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And Richie Sambora had a solo record in 91, which is very, very blues. And John Bon Jovi wrote half of Keep the Faith by himself, and he was just Oh, okay. Izzy Stradlin.
Yeah.
But
Talking about a big hair metal, glam metal record that went kind of more
Love that
bluesy.
album.
I was real into that album
Dig
at the time. That
Yeah.
I remember reading a review that said something like, this is a better Keith Richards album than anything Keith Richards has ever done.
Pretty
well,
much
yeah,
true.
we discussed that in the Discord.
Yeah, and since
If
I
you
was 13,
join the Patreon.
come talk about Izzy Stradlin with me. And since I was 13, my big takeaway from that comment was, oh, okay, I guess that's what Keith Richards is. Like
Hmm.
now I have a frame of reference for Keith Richards because I like Izzy Stradlin and can go backwards from there.
think
Keith Richards solo records are a lot like that Izzy album.
I think I came to this from I think you guys would have been the older kids on the bus. I might need a mullet census later on to find out who was going on, or who at least had a jean jacket with a Metallica Ride the Lightning patch on it. So I was like avoided metal because some of the scary kids were listening to that. It seemed too devilish for my Catholic self. So Depeche Mode Violator was my favorite album when Nevermind was released. So I was coming into it from that angle, and
Preaching to the choir, man.
yeah, like getting into Erasure, like that was like New Order, learning, having opinions on the new Electronics, album. So yeah, it was like, in a weird way, it was like an easier way to get into contemporary rock. I mean, I like classic rock and all that, but like it didn't speak to me as a 12-year-old, the glam stuff, and it was too ridiculous and too scary. But that's the difference between being 12 and 13 in those ranges than being 17.
Mhm.
Yeah, as a person who turned 13 in 92, I had kind of an interesting metal story because that was the first opinion I ever developed about music. I entered 92 liking whatever MTV played, and I ended 92 liking whatever metal MTV played. And that started off with me just kind of not discriminating. If I was told it was metal, I decided I liked it. But I definitely I got into metal at that age less because I heard and liked it, and more because I liked the idea of being the kind of person that was into metal. I was the final suburban teenager ever to get really into metal. The band that, I mean, Ugly Kid Joe's where I started, but by the end of the year, the band that kind of exemplified what I wanted metal to be, and that I kind of had decided was my metal band, was Megadeth, who put out Countdown to Extinction that year. I've actually still never listened to the album, but the singles from that were big deals to me as a 13-year-old. It was like Symphony of Destruction, Foreclosure of a Dream, and Sweating Bullets. I watched the Sweating Bullets video recently, and it's more amazing now than it ever was then. It's one of those things where you can sort of laugh with it or laugh at it, and it works equally well either way. But like something about Megadeth seemed like, they weren't corny like glam bands, but they weren't too scary, but they were scary enough. Dave Mustaine seemed like he was probably intelligent and thoughtful in the right ways, but could also be, loud and crazy. So I think that from the perspective that only a 13-year-old can have, Megadeth was like the perfect metal band that did all the right things.
So the interesting thing about Metal Death, tying it back to, we were just talking about Izzy Stradlin, and obviously his albums riffing against or competing with his former band Guns N' Roses. And we just talked about Keith Richards, who famously people believe that the Rolling Stones are at their best when you have Jagger and Richards kind of squaring off against each other. If you think about it, that Megadeth is squaring off against Metallica, that in this era especially, it's Dave Mustaine having to prove or show that they were wrong for kicking him out of the band and delivering,
He has
which
spent
in
his entire
hindsight,
career doing that, though.
yeah, but in hindsight, probably is the moment where, at least artistically, he puts out a record that absolutely hands down stands ahead above what his former bandmates are doing at that moment.
Absolutely, and had a lot of commercial success with it too. He had hits. When I saw Some Kind of Monster years later, and he's talking about how all his life he's just always kind of been competing with Metallica and in Metallica's shadow. I always I mean, I get that, certainly as an adult, I get that. But when I think back to my perspective as a 13-year-old, I thought, you're doing great, man. You have hit songs.
Yeah.
I liked him more than I liked Metallica, but even if I liked Metallica more, I didn't get the impression that Dave Mustaine had anything to feel bad about. And then I turned into an adult. Understood that.
Oh no, he still feels that way to this day.
I know.
I like the
And-
idea of 13-year-old Hale trying to pump up Dave Mustaine.
No,
Come on,
13-year-old
Dave.
Hal did not
You're
know that
worthy.
Dave Mustaine needed pumping up. 13-year-old Hal thought that Dave Mustaine was aspirational.
You got it, bud.
I know you guys have come to expect.
Oh,
You guys have come to expect this, I'm sure, but
We're gonna see a
Oh
picture
yeah,
of
there's
Dave
Chip
Mustaine.
and Dave.
There's Chip and Dave.
That's awesome.
Chip knows everybody.
I want to say, just so I can put my age into this, because I appreciate that everybody's been saying where they were. 92 was the year I graduated from high school and started college. So I went from a graduating class of 92 people in 1992 in a small Ohio town to a campus of 20,000 people at Bowling Green and joining the college radio station. And I remember walking into the college radio station the night that they did, like, hey, do you want to join the staff? Come by at like 7:30 on Wednesday and meet the staff. And I walked in and the music director was there. John, or Jay knows him or knows the name, John Riccardi. And he looked at me and he goes, so what do you listen to? And I said, oh, I listen to everything, rock, rap. And he just kind of shook his head. He went, oh,
Yeah.
this kid doesn't know anything.
Yeah. I had somebody at my radio station at the time do that to me too. Like, your favorite band sucks.
Well, it wasn't
That
even
was
that.
bad.
He's just like, this kid clearly has thimble deep knowledge of music. I'm into like Pearl Jam and Crisscross.
Yeah.
That was basically I liked Boys to Men and Led Zeppelin. I didn't have anything. So going to that, having that experience in 1992 was, it was life-changing, because a lot of these records that I would have never heard if it wasn't for being exposed to it at the radio station, watching MTV. I honestly was not familiar with R.E.M. up until that point. I had maybe heard a single here and there, but Automatic for the People was like the first time I went, oh, okay. I see that this is like very interesting, and got it. Like when I heard Pop Song 89 or something else before that, I was like, it's just weird. It's kind of weird.
I don't want to leave the metal topic without mentioning the Godfathers of Metal released probably their last great album, Dehumanizer, in 1992, which probably nobody remembers.
Black
At the time,
Sabbath.
it was like, yeah, so Sabbath releases that record. I think it was not the right time. Like, nobody cared about a Sabbath reunion with Ronnie James Dio in 1992, and it didn't do well, but there's some great stuff on there, and it picks right up where they left off in the early 80s with him.
are you? I've got a story.
Give it to me.
So at the Lynch Mob Life, Sex, and Death show, Black Sabbath was supposed to be in town the next night playing at this auditorium, Veterans Memorial Auditorium.
Mhm.
And I was in college. I had a photo pass. I'm taking pictures of Lynch Mob, and I turn over, and obviously this is a very targeted people I'm talking to, Tim and Jay, in Columbus. So, well, the Newport Music Hall has like a little side door, that's kind of like the public can't get to it. It's a side door out to the parking lot. And I look over there, and Ronnie James Dio is watching Lynch Mob. And so I know the bouncer, and I go over to the bouncer. I'm like, hey, can I go talk to Ronnie James Dio really quick? And before cell phones, I had a camera.
The bouncer's like, no, that's why I'm here, jackass.
No. I knew him. I knew that guy too. So
okay.
Of course, Chip knew him.
Of course you did.
So I got my picture with Ronnie
Naturally.
James Dio, and I'm like, hey, Ronnie, listen, I write for the college paper, which is super important in Columbus. So can I interview you tomorrow? And he actually gave me his manager's phone number, and I called, and what ended up happening is they did not sell enough tickets for the auditorium. And so they moved it to the Newport, and they advertised it as like Black Sabbath plays a special small club show. It's because they did not sell enough tickets. But I did not get the interview because they ended up going to the radio station to promote the show. But Ronnie left me 2 tickets and 2 after show passes. So after the show, I get to go backstage, and I walk by Tony Iommi, and this is 1992 Chip, and who's now into Nirvana and Soundgarden. And I just look at him, I'm super nervous, and I'm like, Tony, welcome back. Like, welcome back. Black Sabbath is back, and he just looked at me, he goes, here comes my British accent. We were never gone. And then he just walked away, and I'm like, and I don't think he was mad that I said it, but he was like, basically, we never went away.
Right.
You might be into other stuff now, but we were never gone. But that show was so
We were never gone.
loud.
Yeah.
That show was so loud. The was it TVI? TV Crimes.
Yep.
I mean, the bass on I just remember the whole place just shaking. It was so loud in that venue. It was too small of a venue for them to be playing, which was awesome.
It seemed like for bands of that ilk, like Maiden, Priest, I don't know what else you want to mention, but the 90s seemed like a dead zone for a lot of those bands.
I'm telling you, that's a great roundtable. You got all these arena bands coming out of the 80s and 70s. They were still selling tickets, but like all Bad Company changed singers, right? Like Brian Howe was singing for them in the 90s, and Foreigner had some changes going on, and all these bands who had come from arenas in the 90s, I think a lot of them still got to play arenas, but they were definitely not the arena rock heroes they had been in the 80s and 70s. They were having to fight against the Soundgardens and Nirvanas, the Alice in Chains, the up and coming kids. Now they had to compete for those arena spots now, and I think
you're right, and I think that maybe the lining is that or silver lining for them is that they went and played arenas in Japan, Southeast Asia, and they went to South America especially.
Oh yeah. Yeah, a lot of those arena rock bands, and especially Bad Company, which had a kind of a minor comeback in 1990. By 92, they were gone again. And well, it didn't help that they also kind of went almost adult contemporary as well. But that was an interesting time because they could still sell tickets to shows, but they were all still actively recording as well. So that was an interesting dichotomy, because you're having these bands with a great catalog trying desperately to add to it, but they're like, no, I want to hear Nirvana.
I think additionally, you have a whole lot of 80s punk bands that are all of a sudden finding a new opportunity, because these are the bands that the alternative bands are citing. I mean, you've got Suicidal Tendencies coming out this year with Art of Rebellion, which is a great record. And especially you've got the return of Social Distortion, who are going to become super important later in the decade. But
and Eric, like these bands, they were like 4 or 5, 6 albums into their career.
Oh yeah.
But like in 92, when it started to become the whole changing tides, like I don't think I knew Suicidal Tendencies and I knew Social Distortion, but to a lot of people, they were new bands, right? And they were just getting that first exposure.
This is also the year that Rollins' band breaks through, and this is the year that Danzig, the band, breaks through.
Yeah, and only in 92 could an act like Rollins' band actually break through to the mainstream.
Mm-hmm. I do want to mention we had a couple other people who made comments. We can talk about these records that get brought up. Some of them have already been mentioned, but I want to mention Kyle Bittner brought up The Hips Fully Completely and R.E.M's Automatic for the People, along with Sugar's Copper Blue, which we've talked about on this show. The single soundtrack, Soul Asylum's Grave Dancers Union, huge record for them. I mean, clearly the biggest of their career, with Runaway Train and
Somebody to Shove.
Exactly. Alice in Chains, White Zombie, Rage Against the Machine's debut album came out in 1992. Body Count. Which, for whatever the quality of the music was, they got attention.
Well, Yeah.
They had definitely got attention.
For the
Blind,
wrong reasons, though. I mean,
sure. But there are always bands that are getting attention for the wrong reason of every era.
right,
And,
but body count is unique because that record pretty much, I mean, yeah, it had some MTV play and it was doing moderately well for a rapper fronting a metal band in 1992, but it only sold because the song Cop Killer got pulled from the record. So
Right.
everyone went and bought it while
and
it's
politicians
still
talked
on
about
there.
it, and
You have the president of the United States talking about
Yeah.
U2 in this era and talking about Cop Killer.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Also mentioned Blind Melon, and thanked the DMO Union for suggesting albums or bringing up albums like Saigon Kicks, The Lizard, and Life, Sex, and Death, which we talked about earlier. And then Richard Waterman, he mentioned Animal Bag, Archangels, which you've covered, the Bad Company's Here Comes Trouble, which I think somebody just talked about that, Bangalore Choir's On Target. I am not familiar with that record. Oh, look at Chip, got it right there.
He does.
How did he
Hair
find it so
metal based on the
fast?
cover art alone.
How is that possible so quick? The
got a
Black
handful.
Crowes, Southern Harmony, Buffalo Tom's Let Me Come Over, which that's the album I think I discovered them on, which was because of Taillights Fade.
Same.
Chainsaw Kittens, Flipped Out in Singapore. We talked to many members of that band many years ago.
Mhm.
Def Leppard's Adrenalize. Is that the last, like, Def Leppard's always been a band. I mean, they've been together, but is that the last like radio really big push for them?
Yeah.
See, they were a band that kind of survived, at least at their early couple years of the 90s,
What
because
was
they were
the
so
single?
like loved by MTV.
Yeah.
What was the single? Anybody remember?
There
Is it-
were
Let's
many
Get
singles.
Rocked.
Let's
Yeah.
Get Rocked.
Make Love Like a Man.
Have you ever needed somebody who's so bad tonight?
Yes.
Like 4 or 5 off that album.
Stand Up, Kick Love into Motion.
In Emotion, that's the
Yep.
other one.
I think I still know every word to Let's Get Rocked from having been 12 at the time.
I mean, you're 12 and you want to hear a song. Let's Get Rocked is the song you want
Yeah.
to throw your fist in the air for. I
The
mean, that's
ultimate 12-year-old like revenge against your parents fantasy kind of.
there you go.
Mhm.
Extremes, 3 Sides. Failure's Comfort.
Mhm.
This was one that we were supposed to absolutely bring up because Scott Holgram wasn't able to make it. Faith No More's Angel Dust.
Great album.
Oh yeah.
When I was looking at a list of 92 albums before this and just jotting down stuff I might want to mention, that stood out to me as like, I don't know what to say except it's just amazing. It's definitely the best album they've done.
And so that was like the Welcome Back to Ohio State concert. I mean, I know it was a regular tour, but that was the first week of college. 92 was Faith No More and Helmet, who were coming off, getting signed to the $1 million contract and the Unsung record, Meantime record, which is that was a hard sell. They conned somebody out of some money there, I think, because that's not palatable to the masses. I don't think it's a great record. I mean, it's my favorite
Oh,
Helmet
no,
record.
You know who was palatable to?
Unsung. I think
That-
Unsung was the track that made that record.
That's
Yes.
the only thing that
Palatable.
could have sold that record.
And
You know what though?
Mhm.
The football players that I went to high school with loved that song, even though they were not into alternative music. Like, that was made for lifting and for
Oh,
for
yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like,
That's a
and
great
those dudes
record.
were all like wearing shorts and like they didn't look alternative. They all had short hair and they just looked like dudes who were like
They
kind of
look like the guys in Helmet.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't remember them ever being
No.
considered an alternative. Like on MTV, at least they'd be, in Headbangers Ball territory. They would never be in like 120 Minutes territory.
Right.
that's something we should talk about, is that this is also, I believe, the year that suddenly MTV goes, oh, we need to start Alternative Nation. That
Yeah.
people are actually
Yeah.
watching this weird show we put on Sunday nights in the Dead Zone.
Yeah.
It's also
So-
the year that like MTV and the whole industry starts kind of I mean, related to what you were just saying, shifting any metal band that they can into being marketed and perceived as alternative. I think that when I was first learning all of these bands in '92, I would watch like Headbangers Ball, and they'd have like Nirvana, or I'll bet Pearl Jam was on there, stuff like that.
Right, but that's the fall of '91 where they're like,
Okay.
oh my God, I don't know how to promote this.
Right.
And so the closest thing that they had, if they couldn't get on 120 minutes, they got on Headbangers Ball.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and I mean, now keep in mind that just a year prior, you didn't have a whole lot of loud guitar on 120 minutes.
No.
Yeah, if anybody looked at the Discord, I posted the MTV set list for their top 20 videos of 1991 from 120 minutes.
Yeah, I saw
And if
that.
you look at that, you'll see that it, of course, ends with Nirvana, but you'll see it's like half of these weird British bands that were college rock, and the other half of what we think of now as alternative of that era.
Yeah, there's this whole sort of aborted version of alternative rock that just kind of didn't survive the Nirvana shift.
Yeah.
Tim, I
There's,
don't know.
Oh, go ahead, Chip.
I was gonna say, Tim, I don't know if somebody mentioned, but the other one that we haven't talked about yet.
Oh, well, yes.
Check your head.
Boys. Check your head.
Yeah.
That
Like-
might be my favorite album of '92.
Yeah.
I mean, that was such a shaking of the ground of. I mean, they completely reinvented themselves with that record, which they had done the previous record, and crossed over.
They were playing their own instruments.
Yeah.
Which is what they did originally, though, because they were originally a hardcore punk band.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you got suckered into buying that same old bullshit
absolutely
EP
not.
too.
I own 0 Beastie Boys because not my thing. But
I bought that EP and I got to go back and listen to it because I bought it because I was
terrible.
a Beastie Boys fan and it was like I want to hear them as a punk rock band and it was awful.
no,
Yes.
all my Misfits fanatic friends are like, they open for the Misfits. You got to hear this. And I was like, no.
I've been on a real Beastie Boys kick lately, and Check Your Head to me is absolutely the pinnacle. Every other album to me is just getting better and better until Check Your Head, and then getting slightly worse after Check Your Head. That to me is just where everything that makes the Beastie Boys matter converge.
You muted yourself, Hale.
Oh crap!
That's right. It was just for 2 seconds. But I agree with you. I mean, that was an album that, in terms of crossover and between various sectors or everybody listened to that record. That's what made that such an interesting record, because it just touched on so many different audiences.
It's so weird. Sorry.
No, it's go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's so weird because they were clearly in this weird space where they kind of had rock cred and rap cred at the same time, and were kind of marketed to both, which for the time was really, really uncommon. But just from being a teenager at the time, my memory is that they seemed to be marketed primarily to the alternative kids, as much as they were doing rap music. They I was listening to their follow-up album today. It had Q-Tip on it. And I think Bismarcky, and that's it for guest appearances. They were clearly artistically in the rap world, but the industry absolutely decided that Beastie Boys were for rock fans, regardless of what they sounded like. Which
So rap is also an interesting moment here, because we're talking about a place where you have the pop rap of Criss Cross and MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice. And then on the other side, you've got, and we just talked about Body Count, but the other side, you've got De La Soul, you've got Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy, you've got all of these hip hop bands.
Schnickens, Das Effects,
Me Find Me,
Black Sheep.
Spearhead.
I mean, we're missing the biggest album of 1992, which is The Chronic.
By Dr. Dre.
Then the Pearl Jam 10 equivalent of it with Ice Cube's The Predator. Questlove named The Chronic one of the 5 biggest moments in hip hop history.
Absolutely.
And I'd say it's more important than Nevermind in 2022, where you look where pop music is.
I agree.
I mean, and he did it with live drums and live bass to get that sound on that album.
That punk, which which is really what evolved into alternative, has always been crossed over with hip hop in a way that a lot of people don't know or acknowledge. You go back to like African Bambaataa, he's sampling like Kraftwerk, and some of the first punk records or some of the first rap records by white artists were people like Captain Sensible from The Damned, Dee Dee Ramone from the Ramones, The Clash, Debbie Harry and Blondie. We're talking coming out of this, we just talked
New
about
York.
the Beastie Boys, they're on, Deaf American Records, which is, LL Cool J, but it's also Slayer and Danzig. There's this crossover that's going on that also has been kind of forgotten about, because what happens is gangster rap comes in and suddenly it's a different ball game.
There's a clip where it came out recently. Dave Grohl was talking to Pharrell about his influence as a drummer, and he tells a story about how Tony Thompson from Chic was at a barbecue of his, which is just amazing in and of itself. And he goes up to Tony and says, you don't know, man, I've taken so much stuff from you. And Tony said, I know. And it's, but it's, it's the at the start of Teen, Smells Like Teen Spirit is from the Gap Band. You've got, and Grohl himself says he's rolling in from disco. So, all this stuff, it's just in the same way that disco didn't really die. There was, the disco demolition night didn't really actually kill off disco. Just all these things that were like, I can't help but wonder to what extent to hardcore and punk and disco, to the extent they got pushed underground, across some paths.
I think a lot of that is the New York connection. I think, someone mentioned that before. I think that, in, early 80s New York, that's when the Beastie Boys formed. And also, Debbie Harry is working rap into a Blondie song. David Byrne is working into a Talking Heads song. And that's not a coincidence. These were people that were in New York and were not at all part of the burgeoning rap scene, but were, occasionally around it and aware of it when a lot of people weren't yet, and intrigued by it. I think that with Talking Heads in particular, there's only that one song, Cross-Eyed and Painless, where they sort of sneak in a rap part, which is a lot of people think of Rapture by Blondie as the first time a rock band incorporated rap. Cross-Eyed and Painless by Talking Heads beat it by like a week or something.
Well, you see,
It was
Rapture
the first time it was popular.
Right,
It
yeah.
was the first time it
Rapture's
became
the first time
popular.
people heard a rock band do it. Talking Heads is the first time a rock band did it. But yeah, like all these, like Talking Heads were influenced a lot by other elements of like hip hop and disco and funk. That was all kind of going into their music, and like it's all, it's very intentional. And Beastie Boys are the same thing. These are punk kids that were in New York at the right time and just realized rap was really cool and started messing around with it more as a joke than anything, and then just ended up being amazing.
Well, in relation to that, Hal, that was an era where artists of a certain genre were not just influenced by their peers in that genre. So, I mean, you had Run DMC, who arguably were the first rap act to really break through to a mainstream audience on a regular basis. All of their songs were based on rock riffs.
Yeah, Raising Hell is a rock record, in my opinion.
Raising Hell is just as much of a rock record that it is a hip hop record.
That's Rick Rubin's doing. I feel like he's kind of the nexus there.
Well, you get a whole bunch of bands here who are blowing up that are riffing on a lot of Parliament Funkadelic.
Yeah.
Whether it's Fishbone or the Red Hot Chili Peppers, or it's the multiple samples by, Public Enemy or whoever that are. I mean, this is where they're coming from.
There's one other R&B inspired album I need to bring up, or Bucks is going to reprimand us. That Congregation came out by Afghan Wigs in 1992.
Oh yeah.
And when I got into Afghan Wigs as an adult, because my late friend Gary got me into Afghan Wigs, and cheesy enough, I thought the cover of The Temple was amazing, and that was my gateway to Afghan Wigs as an adult. And I just love Congregation. And I just love, I mean, they're clearly a rock band, but I think they're really an R&B band too. And I mean, just love the Afghan Wigs. Came to them later in life, but Congregation was as good of a start as any to get into that band, and had to bring them up before we ended.
That's a band that like I mentioned with Uncle Tupelo, I didn't get into them until Black Love, and I went backwards and discovered Congregation and Gentlemen and Up in It in reverse. Another band I want to mention that hasn't come up that also I think Jay has the same experience. I didn't get into this band until the end of the 90s, which was the Manic Street Preachers. And this is the year that Generation Terrorists come out, which I still think is one of the most insane attempts of a debut album, which they wanted to sell something like 20 million copies and then break up.
Yeah.
And just a incredible lifetime of accomplishments and chaos and stuff that's gone around in that band. Definitely worthy of the books that I've read about them. And but Generation Terrorists at this, it sounds completely of the time and completely out of time at the same time, because they're channeling Guns N' Roses and Public Enemy
Yep.
and The Clash and all these things, and the production sounds insanely out of time with 1992. It's overly reverbed, and the guitar, everything is overly reverbed.
Did Tim Palmer mix it?
Yeah. But yeah, I want to there were a couple other albums that Richard Waterman mentioned that I wanted to bring up that I think that are relevant to this year. The Lemonheads, It's a Shame About Ray.
Good album.
I don't think this has come up, but Stone Temple Pilots Core, we haven't really dug into that.
Or
But,
That did come out in 92.
yeah.
Yep.
The Sunday's Blind.
Love it.
What else did he have here?
I'm just thinking of all the poor people that probably saw the title, have never listened to this podcast before, saw albums of 1992 and expected us to spend a half an hour at least on Core. And we're like, oh yeah, Core came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that record really
everybody
didn't
knows
hit
it,
until
man.
93.
But let's talk about
Yeah.
Generation Terrorists.
Yeah. Lives, Mental Jewelry. L7's Bricks Are Heavy.
Oh yeah.
And Caius's Blues for the Red Sun. Those were a couple other ones that I wanted to. Grunt
Yeah.
Truck's Push.
That just got reissued on vinyl too.
Yes. And of course, we can't forget Faster Pussycats, Whipped. Came
Yeah.
out.
That was actually on my list.
Chip, I'm expecting you to whip that out immediately, either on cassette or CD.
I don't have
Do
it.
it, do
I don't
it,
have
do
it at the
it.
ready, but I can
Yeah,
get it
it's
before we're done.
way over there. So.
Yeah, it's in the other room.
I also just wanted to throw in, since we cracked the seal a little bit on rap, I just wanted to quickly mention 2 songs that came out that year that I think are real standouts that are underrated. There's Don't Sweat the Technique by Eric B. and
Oh, I
Rakim.
love that song. Yes.
That's Rakim, of course, is acclaimed. That song and that album, I think, are not considered highlights, but the second verse of that song is my favorite rap verse ever. And then I also wanted to mention Pete Rock and CL Smooth's They Reminisce Over You from Mecca and the Soul Brother, which I think is for 1992 by far the most emotional depth that a rap song had ever shown. It still makes me cry when I listen to it, and this is from a genre that people were still writing off at the time. So I just kind of wanted to throw those in my consciousness.
If we're gonna talk rap too, I want to throw in the Far Side as well.
Yes, yeah.
But Tim, I found Whipped, and I have no idea when I met them, but it's an autographed copy of Whipped.
Nice.
So I'm going to segue
Excellent.
from Whipped to which Seattle band is has a song dedicated to the lead singer on Whipped.
Mother
Yeah.
Love Bone.
Yeah.
I caused
yeah,
a big
yeah.
stir by showing this in the Discord. So
Why
There
was
were
that a big
two-
stir?
two albums.
Because it was recorded in 1990.
Yes, but there was
And
two
89.
albums that from 90 and 91 that went platinum and sold huge that were reissued in 92 and people discovered. And one of them is Temple of the Dog, which has been talked about. The other is this 2 CD Mother Love Bone set.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which I remember, I think it was the end of the year, or it's either the end of 92 or the beginning of 93, Kurt Loder on MTV News talking about how Pearl Jam members played on 4 platinum selling records that year. Pearl Jam's 10, the single soundtrack, Temple of the Dog, and Mother Love Bone.
Oh yeah, I mean, without a doubt, more people listened to that album in '92 than they did in
Oh yeah,
90
absolutely.
when Apple
Well,
came out, or '89.
Apple
Shine
didn't
came
get
out.
a big wide release because it came out, you know.
Yeah.
Well, that's the shiny P.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Like I bought that when that first came out because I thought it looked cool, and there was a song called Capricorn Sister, and I'm a Capricorn. Birthday
Nice.
was yesterday, so it was just like, hey, this looks cool. I'll buy it, and
So-
like, you know, I dug it. So
Yeah, the point is that the other part of 92 is that suddenly not only were all of these records breaking, but people were going back to find stuff. This is where Red Hot
Right.
Chili Peppers get a best of album released to
Yeah.
cash in on the popularity of Blood
oh yeah,
Sugar
that's
Sex
right. Out in
Magic.
LA.
right.
I need to mention an artist that I think in the 90s I was not focused on in the way that I was in the 80s. So I've had to go back and sort of revisit a lot of these albums. But Prince put out
Oh,
The Love
The Symbol
Symbol in
album.
1992,
Yeah.
which going back now is just unbelievably packed with stuff. You got My Name
Yeah.
is Prince, Sexy MF,
Yeah.
7, Damn You. I mean,
Sunday
And I-
Papers is just wildly weird.
Yep.
Yep.
That's, I think, an underrated album because I think Prince was already kind of falling off at the time. Like, I think, just in terms of cultural relevance, I feel like this was
yes.
the beginning of the end.
It was well, you see, it was the first time he fully embraced rap in his music.
Yeah.
So
That
Chip,
and
where's
those
your
were
picture
not
with
so
Prince?
But like, the album is like
Not
7
only-
is maybe my
I have
favorite.
no picture of Prince.
Yeah, so not only did I never meet Prince, I never saw Prince live, which is a regret.
Neither
Yeah, me
have I.
too.
Yeah, me either.
I met Prince.
Nice.
Same
I
one.
am not a Prince
Explain.
fan. I stood there thinking to myself, all of my Prince maniac friends would be dying, and I'm here doing my job.
There
I
you
did
go.
security at Target Center in Minneapolis for like a year in 2002. He came to see Beyonce. I never talked to him. I never shook his hand or anything. I didn't even
Oh,
really
he
look.
wouldn't. He wouldn't have done either with you.
Oh, I knew that.
No.
I knew that going in. I dealt with his chauffeur, who was a super nice guy, but because I was a professional and I just kind of nodded and I, gave him the information. And then a little bit later on, I worked with a guy who had been part of a security team, and he was like, "Yeah, he did that all the time, and he was fine as long as you didn't start bothering him or whatever." And he said this guy I worked with said, "Oh yeah, he was super cool to us as the security team." So
There's sort of a famous Columbus story that he stopped at an all-night donut shop on campus, Buckeye Donuts,
Mhm.
and got out of his limo and ran in and got a donut at some point in his career.
Yes. Yes.
I'm
I've
sure.
heard that story.
Here's my time I'm flexing the ticket stub now. Everybody else flexing the
Nice.
CDs, but I've got my Prince.
Nice.
MSG. It was
Very
unbelievable.
I'm going to throw it out there. Any albums, we've covered a lot of records. Anything that we haven't brought up. One that I'm surprised, it is not an album, it's an EP. And Ian,
Yeah, it's on my list. So
say it.
9 Inch Nails broken.
Nails broken.
Especially with the metal, because fuck you guys. He won the Grammy for Best Metal Performance. All you guys talking metal, and here I am biting my tongue. The
I have,
That's
freaking
one, I have
background.
one comment on Broken.
I was
Broken,
leaving it for Ian to bring up.
Broken sounds absolutely amazing on good headphones or a good
Oh, yeah.
stereo system. There's nothing that sounds like it. And if it's
Yeah.
on a crap system, it sounds just like noise.
Well, actually, in the CD, it has the warning: "Do not play on mono device." It's actually
Yeah.
in the liner notes.
But
So
I-
that's one of the reasons why.
I keep coming back to Broken, and on my good stereo system, there's nothing like putting that album on that EP on. And
So
Alice in Chains came out with Sap, so you had two big
Yep.
EPs that year.
So and the 9 Inch Nails tip with the being on the metal category, that's just yet another example of how the
The
metal
Grammys have
genre
no
was
clue.
really being pushed in good ways in this era, because for so long been in this small box of these are the metal bands, but alternative, especially with, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Nine Inch Nails, White Zombie, all of that falls under metal, but it's all pushing the boundaries.
Well, you also had nominated that year Ministry with New World Order, NWO, from Psalm 69, The Way to Succeed and The Way to Suck Eggs. So, I mean, they're in that metal category. I mean, there's two industrial bands that began the crossover of that genre and would also change it. I mean, if you look at other industrial albums from that year, you've got Skinny Puppy with Last Rites, phenomenal album. Money from KMFDM, Decrypts with One, which started their influence with guitar and metal, but and even like it's still rooted in a lot of the old school electro industrial. But then you have Ministry with Psalm 69, then Nine Inch Nails, and that changed the genre, and that's a whole other discussion for another podcast that I can go into for an hour. But yeah, I mean, Broken and the Fixed EP, which was remix EP released later in '92, and that's probably the most industrial release Trent Reznor has released. and that was Fotis and Coil doing a lot of the remixes and heavy lifting for that remix EP.
I wanted to get a plug-in for Sonic Youth's Dirty too. That's just, I think that's the best entry point too for people who are have heard of them or just have a vague sense of them. I think that's the place to start, more so than, I mean, I think Daydream Nation's a little bit more of a critical pick, but I don't, it's not the best way to get in.
Had more accessible songs.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
And if people only heard them then, like, where are you going to get in with the later period? Maybe it's Murray Street, but I think Dirty's is the best place to start. And it's also, they had already signed with a major label in 1990. They were one of the, the sort of, they weren't obviously on SST, but like those types of bands that were percolating around the underground in the 80s, the times they were starting to get signed to the majors. They got signed in 1990. Goo, I think, was a commercial disappointment from where the record company stood, but that Dirty is my favorite, and it's like easily a top 10 for the decade for me.
I think Goo was probably another one that people went back and picked up.
Yeah.
So
the Cool Things single did make some noise, but
yeah. Well, the thing that's Goo is I got one of those when they came out with the deluxe edition and they give the demos. I like the demos off Goo much like half of the songs. I listen to the demos now rather than the original tracks. It's almost like just, they just didn't have the right approach going in. But
so one that was mentioned, but I think does not get enough love is
Screaming Trees.
Screaming Trees, Sweet Oblivion, which I would put in the category of everybody heard the single, nobody listened to the album, or everybody heard the two singles and didn't check out the album. And I think especially now with Mark Lanigan having become the big name rock star that he is, this is an album that people should go back and check out.
Absolutely.
Very accessible.
Yeah, that album's fantastic.
Solid.
Got one more album I want to just throw out there.
Yes.
Also, did I just interrupt something? Sorry.
Go right ahead.
Oh, sorry. Also, the Flaming Lips got big on their next album. This is the year they put out their major label debut, Hit.
Yes.
Really good album. Every song on it's great. It also has by far the most annoying hidden track I've ever heard. So definitely check out part of that hidden track. You will not finish it, I promise. But the album is great.
Yep.
I got to run through. I got 4 more, but I'll do them quick.
Well,
Run them through.
I've got like 100.
So 92 is, 91 is when I did my first interview. 92 is when I was kind of starting to really roll into it. And I interviewed Bob Forrest from Thelonious Monster, who has since gone on to be Dr. Drew's partner on Celebrity Rehab. But at the time in 1992, it was their first major label record. It's called Beautiful Mess.
Yep.
For those who don't know Thelonious Monster, I mean, Bob Forrest sold drugs to the Chili Peppers and the Fishbones and hung out. He was part of that crew, but never achieved the success they did. And they all appeared as guests on that record, the guys from Soul Asylum. But when I interviewed Bob at the time, the two things he was famous for at that time was he smoked crack before singing the national anthem at the LA Clipper game and forgot the words and almost got beat up on his way out. And then right after that, he was in DC on stage and he made some comment like, "Hey, we should go kill George Bush." I hope that doesn't earn me a knock on the door like it did him. But he you don't make a threat to the president while you're playing in DC without. But when I interviewed him, I asked him to turn me on to a band that he had heard, and he said he had been at a party in LA and had seen this band called Wax, who a couple years later would put out the single California with the guy running down the street on fire. But their first record was called What Else Can We Do? Great, 25-minute, 8 or 9 song, really quick kind of little pop punk stuff. When I saw them, they turned me on. So I kept asking people, so Wax, Bob Forrest turned me on to you. Who can you turn me on to? And they turned me on to Rocket from the Crypt, who put out Circa Now in 1992, another great record. And then the one other record I want to mention is I was dating. So I was, everything we've talked about tonight is what I was into. I was a 21-year-old college, whatever year that is, sophomore,
junior.
And I started dating this girl, and we did not share music taste at all. She was from the Akron Canton area in Ohio, and she knew about this band called Over the Rhine, who were from that area. For those of you who don't know Over the Rhine, I don't even know how to describe them. It was totally not my kind of music, but because we started dating, I ended up seeing Over the Rhine probably, like 30 times, just because they were an Ohio band. They fell in line with like the Cowboy Junkie, Sarah McLachlan. It's kind of like that. It's not folk rock, but it's not what it was not Alice in Chains, but Patience came out that year. They put it out on their own, and then I think IRS signed them out of that. But Over the Rhine in that 92 period, I kept forgetting how important they were to my life at the time. And they're still around, and they've been very successful getting to just that point where they're not a household name, but they do very well when they play, and they've never had radio hits, but it's just putting the work in and building your fan base a little bit at a time and just doing it.
So I've got a couple of debut. Oh, sorry. I've got a couple of debut albums for this year, for 1992, that people may not realize that obviously become bigger players later in the year. Aphex Twin, Selected Ambient Works, 1985 to 1982. That was their first album that came out. And The Prodigy Experience came out in 1992, their first album.
And the Orb. Yeah. The Orb came out with UFO Orb that year too. So
yeah, their first album came out. Their first album came out the year before, though. So
yeah, so their second album.
Album. Yeah. So I mean, like, even though right now, I mean, like, a lot of focus is in obviously grunge and metal and everything. I mean, there are seeds that are being planted right now that, like I said, the crossover with industrial later on in a couple of years, and also now you got 2 major electronic albums coming out this year for bands debuting, and they'll obviously play bigger into later in the 90s.
Yeah.
All right.
Speaking of,
yeah.
Oh, good. You went. Go ahead.
All right,
Phil.
So kind of in line with what you were saying, Ian. The opinion is very divided on this one. The Cure's Wish.
Ah.
Oh, yeah. I love Disintegration. It's my favorite album. Wish, I do not care as much for.
Well, you see that seems to be a lot of the opinion. I always found it very interesting because it was clearly both an attempt at capitalization of whatever Disintegration did for them.
But there's also a lot of change in the band as well with that album as well. So
yeah, and I mean, it was almost a celebration and a self-knowing parody of what Disintegration achieved. I mean, with the painfully obvious hit single and the more pop-oriented arrangements and everything like that. I mean, I kind of dug it in a more they're in on the joke kind of way. But I remembered that one while everyone was talking.
Yeah, they followed up with the excellent single "Burn" for the Crow soundtrack in 1994. So
yeah.
I can't totally dismiss the Cure in the 90s, but I mean, it's not Disintegration or The Head on the Door.
That was going to be my answer for what albums did not stand the test of time. I mean, Wish, they looked it up. It's like it debuted at number 2 on the US charts when it came out, but
that was the beginning of SoundScan. So you saw a lot of albums do that right out of the box.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why labels were scrambling this year, because it came out the year before, and all of a sudden they're saying, okay, we're being lied to, and here's all this underground stuff that or country
Garth Brooks.
that's very popular, and it's like, okay, what the hell do we do?
Yeah. I was gonna say, speaking of British bands and debut albums, a couple that came out from across the pond that I got into, Ocean Color Scene. Their debut album came out that year. Catherine Wheel Ferment, not a debut album, but in that same pool. And two band that toured with those two bands together was House of Love, Babe Rainbow. Was a great record I got into then. The Charlatans, Between 10th and 11th, all records that came out in 92 that I got into. As far as stuff here, some other things that I wanted to bring up that were got kind of maybe overlooked. Big Car band out of Texas called Big Car Normal. Two feature members of Fastball were in this band before the good power pop stuff. The Size out of Northampton, Massachusetts, also kind of power poppy. They just put out their second album 3 years ago. Follow up, they're still doing stuff. They band called Riverside out of Pennsylvania area, Harrisburg. They were kind of like a sub band and produced by the Ocean Blues, Steve Lau. Really good stuff. Uncle Green, Brandon O'Brien kind of got his start producing these guys. They put out 3 albums independently. This was their major label debut on Atlantic Records called Book of Bad Thoughts. Great record. Some of the songs were ones that appeared on the independent stuff. The album didn't end up doing anything, and then they changed their name to 3 Pound Thrill and still went nowhere. A Man Called E, before the Eels, Mark Everett had a little side project called The Man Called E. It was really good. Too Much Joy, their album Mutiny came out in 92, was good. And I can't remember if you guys have covered these guys or not, but the band The Origin and The Bend.
Yes.
If you like Jellyfish and that sort of kind of everything but the kitchen singing power pop, then you probably dig The Origin as well.
Excellent. You mentioned the British bands. I wanted to mention Jesus and Mary Chain. Jesus, yeah, and Honey's Dead. I really like that record. The first 4 records by the Jesus and Mary Chain are all like high on my list. Jay, were there any ones that you missed that were missed that you, or are you just going with Life, Sex, and Death and that's it?
No, Saigon Kick, The Lizard. Did we talk about that?
Yeah,
briefly
mentioned it.
That's maybe their best record. I don't know if it holds up. I need to go back, but I really got into the Wasp, the Crimson Idol that came out that year, which is a concept record. I can't imagine it's bad.
You haven't mentioned Revenge by Kiss.
Yeah, that was the last one I was going to bring up.
Okay. It's the best song on Holy is the best Gene Simmons track. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there you go.
I didn't
bringing
know.
up some
There
Warrior
you go.
Soul.
Warrior Soul, Ghetto
nice.
Nation. Yeah. I like that record a lot.
We're almost at the 2-hour mark. So
Yep.
I need to just mention a couple that haven't been brought up, but I enjoy. Pop Dropper by the Bell Tower, which was Jody from Fountains of Wayne. That was his band in the UK before he joined Fountains of Wayne. The first Blind Mr. Jones album, we covered their second one, but Stereo Musicale came out in 92. What else was there that was on my list? Circus Power, Magic and Madness came out in 1992. The Falling Joys, which we covered. Psycho Hum, that came out in 92. Good record. I can't believe this one hasn't been brought up. New Miserable Experience by the Gin Blossoms. It's a hit machine right there.
See if I can get the camera to focus.
Machine.
Original cover.
On Golden Smog by Golden Smog, which features just all covers.
Yeah.
Cowboy Song by Thin Lizzy, Shooting Star by Bad Company. That is one of my favorites of that era. The band James 7, their album came out in 92.
That's a great one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Born of frustration. That's all you need.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned erotica, but Madonna's erotica is actually I kind of like that record a lot. In terms of whole albums from her, a lot of the '80s stuff is kind of packed with singles, and then there's some sort of dud album tracks. But erotica is a really good record.
Yeah, that one is surprisingly solid.
And then an album that we covered on the podcast, Shot Forth Self Living by Medicine, to go in a complete opposite direction of Madonna. Neil Young's Harvest Moon, I think
Oh,
my
yeah.
favorite album of his, probably from the 80s or 90s. Great set of songs on that record. We did mention Ride. What else did I have on here? Oh, this one goes. This is a shout out for Neil Schmidt. Sade, Love Deluxe, which has my absolutely favorite Sade song, "No Ordinary Love."
That is a great song.
Just perfect, a perfect song. And one that when I was driving around in my friend's Fiero in high school senior year, we would blast the Soup Dragons "Hot Wired."
Oh, that was another one I meant to mention too. Yeah. British
That was it.
bands.
That was such a of the time album.
Wait, Hotwired was the one that had Divine Thing on it,
Thing,
right?
yep.
Exactly.
Yes.
Now you see that I listened to that one a couple of years ago. I found a cassette in a bin that they were tossing away.
That sounds about right.
listened to it.
We haven't
And-
mentioned. We will get yelled at if we don't. But "Little Earthquakes" by Tori Amos. This is this is that year. And then this was the year where I definitely started listening to not just hip hop but R&B. You've got TLC's "Ooh" on the TLC tip. You've got SWV, "It's About Time" with, I don't know if you guys remember the singles, "I'm So Into You" or "Weak."
Yep.
Those were some great songs. I believe this is the year of En Vogue's "Funky Divas," which had
Yes.
just
Oh, sure.
killer
Oh, yeah.
singles: "Free Your Mind," "My Lovin'."
Free Your Mind rocks as hard as anything that came out in 1992.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And the saddest part is they remix it and remove the guitars.
Oh,
My daughter and I watched the '93 MTV Music Video Awards over break recently, and I can confirm that "Free Your Mind" dominated those awards.
Oh,
That
yeah.
that and Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That song slaps. Definitely.
And then this is also the year of 3 years, 5 months, and 2 days in the life.
Arrested Development.
Arrested Development, which I had on cassette, was a very important album for me.
it was the first CD I bought at that and Get a Grip were the first used CDs I bought at my record store up the street from me that's still there to this day, but disappearing and moving later this year. So
No.
a little bit melancholy. The new owners moving the store, and but yeah, picked up that one and Get a Grip, used, probably cost me $6 total. Still have them in my collection.
Nice.
And last but not least, possibly the greatest hip hop song of 1992, "Jump Around" by House of Pain. You simply cannot top that.
Tim, real quick, before we wrap up. So you introduced me at the beginning. My first interview with Terry Elos has been posted. Ian talked about planting seeds. So the early 90s, 1992, we were talking about all these, Run DMCs and the Beastie Boys, and, for better or worse, and the mix of rock and punk and rap planted seeds for the later 90s. And just a little spoiler, the next interview is with maybe one of the lesser known bands that came out of those seeds. So I'll leave you with that.
Yes.
I already know Phil doesn't know who it is, but Phil is not going to like it.
Challenge accepted.
And the seeds were planted because this is the year of I believe Biohazard put out an album
Oh my
this
goodness.
year, if memory serves. I think so. So yes, Urban Discipline. Is that the first Biohazard album? It might be. I don't remember. I don't have their entire.
I just remember
It's the second, I think.
Headbangers Ball just pushing that band so hard.
Yeah, but that was the follow-up State of the Union address or something like that. State of the World address.
Him in
Right.
that funky neon green jewel
Yes.
case.
Oh, the one I saw was funky neon orange jewel case.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Orange, yes.
Yeah, the Pet Shop
Bile
Boys.
was the green one.
You know, Eric, you got to bring up Cantaloupe in the actual show. You can't just put that in the chat. That's
Cantaloupe didn't come out in 92, did it?
As a single, it did apparently.
Yeah.
oh
Okay.
wow.
That sounds a real guilty.
My wife absolutely loves that song. It's a decent album too. I mean, because I got all those Blue Note samples.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't it basically rappers going over Blue Note music?
Right, the same way that
Much.
Arrested Development is rappers going over Sly and the Family Stone. I
Yeah.
mean, if it works, it works.
If it
Well, I mean,
works, it works.
It's not like it's Jive Bunny or something.
Ha ha ha!
There were a lot of evolutionary dead ends for rap around this time.
There were definitely ones that you can only pull it off once and then you got to move on to something else.
What I correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Suzanne Vega's 99.9 Fahrenheit degrees in 92?
I believe I saw that on
Might
my
have
list. Yes.
Might have been.
I don't know. I do know that this is the year of Baby Got Back by Sir Mix-a-Lot, which came out in February, and the single was released in May, and I don't think we've ever recovered.
Yeah, whatever happened to Becky?
Yeah, I know.
Why don't you do a song from Becky's perspective?
Yes, 99.9 Fahrenheit degrees was September 92.
Excellent.
Excellent. Yay. So
All
I'm
right.
not a total idiot.
I think this is the point where I will probably be editing and angry because of how long this has gone on. But I'm not angry now because this was a lot of fun. We've talked about so many records from 92. I'm sure we could keep going, but we have to eventually at some point stop. So we're going to stop here. But of course, we can continue this conversation at Discord. And if you're not yet a member, you should join us over at Patreon, join the DMO Union, and talk more about 92 albums that we didn't get to talk about. I need to thank Jeff, Phil, Chip, Citizen Eric, Joe, Hal, Ian, and Carl. Thank you guys for spending your Wednesday evening. Is it still Wednesday, or we moved into Thursday yet? I don't know.
Nope, still Wednesday.
I can't tell.
23.
Thank you all.
What time is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh gosh,
Exactly.
11.
It's 11. If you have to
I'm gonna
get
get
up
3 hours of sleep. So-
okay. Is that when you have to start shoveling? When up there?
No, oh god. No,
Bite
it's about-
your tongue.
I get up at 3:30 every morning for work, so it's like
Ay, ay, ay. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you here? Go to bed. Good sir.
I only get about 3 hours of sleep a night anyway, Tim. I got a 6-year-old. Come on, you know what it's like.
Oh, it gets better. It
Good.
gets better. At some point, they'll just go to bed on their own.
I don't think that's what that slogan is supposed to go to.
You can use it for a variety of things. It's
Multiple meanings.
it's malleable. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. This was a blast. I'm glad we got to talk about every album that came out in 1992. Nobody talked about Amy Grant, but that's okay. We'll get to
Bonus
it on a future
content.
episode.
That was on purpose.
And want to remind everyone that they can go to Patreon, DMO Union, to support the podcast. They can get the box newsletter there, which comes out every week. 2 new reviews of 80s and 90s music relevant to the show. And they can suggest an album at digmeoutpodcast.com, where they can find a link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a positive review. 5 stars. Help us take down the Colossus Empire of NPR. So, for Jay and Jeff and Phil and Chip and Carl and Ian and Hale and Eric and Joe, I'm Tim, and we're out. And some of us will be back next week for another episode of Dig Me Out.